The COVID-19 outbreak is more than just a pandemic. It's a security threat that has seen human behavior adapt to an almost survival of the fittest mentality, with panic buying taking place across the West, hate crime against certain ethnic groups on the rise, and of course the huge surge in the purchase of weapons in the US. But why are some people in the US behaving this way? At a time where humanity should be coming together to defeat the virus, it seems that many people are taking a me-first attitude, leaving the door open for some serious crimes to take place that could lead to a civil unrest not seen for many decades. I'm Leila Faramaizi, and this is The Outbreak, a regular show on Press TV that looks at the secondary effects of the COVID-19 virus and discusses what the future could hold following the demise of the virus. First up on the show, we'll take a look into something called the security theory and ascertain the connections and similarities to what is happening right now in the world with the COVID-19 virus.
If a village ran out of water, would this be a humanitarian issue? Or if a country was affected by a drought, would this be a national crisis?
We are trying to go on as we are at the moment, but it's only going to be so long before all our resources are out and we don't have any money left to do what we do.
And what about a continent that was totally devastated by famine? Would the world step up to avert masses of deaths?
We know we need to be supporting 5.5 million people in South Sudan with some form of food assistance. But if we don't get the resources to reach that many people, we're going to have to make some really tough choices.
The truth of the matter is, all of the examples just mentioned are of course humanitarian issues, but the wider impact of each of these is also a security crisis, as in times of desperation, suddenly borders have no meaning, and man will take desperate and drastic measures to secure their well-being. The arrival of the COVID-19 virus is no different to what we've seen in the examples I've just mentioned. The fact that in certain areas around the world, people are dying, supplies are running low, and the virus is spreading globally, means that drastic measures will be taken. Just like in a drought or in a famine, vast human displacement will come not through choice, but through necessity. And with the potential of the coronavirus, it could easily be seen as a catalyst to send people rushing to places of safety, plenty, and of course medical facilities, as those who have nothing take basic animal instinct actions to protect themselves in what is nothing more than a case of survival of the fittest, and essentially the law of the jungle. Therefore, with security a major issue, what then will be the consequences for those who aim to breach borders and face the barriers that stand before them across the world, should the virus lead to such actions taking place?
Having just seen the security theory explained, it's interesting to see whether any other security risks can emerge from this virus. Joining me in the studio today is Dibyesh Anand, Professor of International Relations and Head of Social Sciences from the University of Westminster in London. Many thanks for joining me on the show today. My first question relates to the notion whether the virus is more than a medical emergency and a social security issue rather, with some groups claiming they'll use the virus as a weapon, some people panic buying goods leading to more uncertainty, and some reports of looting in various towns. What other risks can the virus pose, security-wise?
The coronavirus, like any other phenomenon, of course, is going to be used by different actors for their own purpose. So it's not only about, let's say, non-state actors finding a new way to terrorize the population, right? Or try to bring state to a standstill. That's, of course, very much a possibility because it's quite easy to do that. But we're also looking at a new kind of security threat where states, particularly the big states, be it China, US, and other states, might start to weaponize these kind of viruses the way they have been doing with biological warfare. So I do think, therefore, this threat to security comes not only from non-state actors, but also state actors.
Thank you, Professor Anand. Look forward to speaking again later in the show. Let's now take a detailed look at what is happening in the US, with reports suggesting that gun sales have surged 70% since the outbreak. And this has seen 2 million extra guns purchased in the last few weeks.
Now that we have seen how an incident, such as a natural disaster or a virus, can lead to security issues, what then are the steps being taken by those equally concerned about the consequences of a security crisis happening on their doorsteps? The United States, along with its Second Amendment, has turned to guns in order to protect themselves from any chaos that might ensue from the outbreak of the virus. Since the COVID-19 disease ran aground on the shores of the US, gun sales in the country have seen a surge of around 70%, with people queuing around corners to purchase weapons in order to protect themselves, their property, and their families. In maintaining the theme of this episode, this appears to have primarily been a cause of the security dilemma caused by the lockdowns taking place around the US, and also applies elsewhere in the world. With many shops and commercial centres now empty and abandoned, the opportunist thefts that take place from looting and other forms of crime mean that the Americans are very touchy-nervy about their property, and hence why some feel purchasing arms to protect themselves is clearly justified, as law and order forces are simply too saturated to deal with everything that's going on. Others are simply claiming their rights under US law, unfortunately.
This is just a exercise in freedom. I mean, it's just a show of solidarity with our Virginia brethren. There's nothing wrong with this. There shouldn't be anything wrong with it. It's our nation was founded on firearms. It was founded with firearms. So there's no reason to be scared. It's just a tool. It's no different than if I was carrying a screwdriver or a hammer.
Yet the US government, lobbied heavily by the National Rifle Association, or NRA, seems to allow one of the most powerful lobbying bodies in the US to continue to thrive and support the sale of arms, whilst all at the same time maintain the notion that arms are safe. But as we know, this is not the case, particularly in the US, which has seen multiple mass shootings in recent times.
If we look at the role that the NRA and weapons manufacturers play in America, they have long pandered to the American people. What's incredibly shameful right now is that gun shops would be open at all, that they would have at any time been considered an essential business.
Joining me back in the studio is Professor Divyesh Anand. So on to the next question. With 2 million guns bought recently, adding to a countless collection of guns already in the homes of the US population, how do you predict the post-COVID-19 era? Because as it is, the US had terrible gun crime and mass shootings.
No, we would have hoped that coronavirus or disaster like this would bring human beings together and allow us to rethink the way in which we run the society. Sadly, that's not likely to be the case in most places. What we'd find is existing inequalities and problems being reinforced. So, for example, the example you gave of the US, should not be surprised that there is an increase in gun violence, or there would be an increase in gun violence, because as society starts to compete with each other, they would not look towards the state. So the people who buy gun are those who believe the state cannot protect them, and they will protect themselves against the other people. Now they have to think of, why do they need to protect themselves against other people? That's because, of course, state is not a proper welfare state where it can take care of all the human beings.
Thank you, Professor Anand, for joining me in the studio. Now let's whisk ourselves over to the online world and have a look at some of the comments you've been raising on the issue of the COVID-19 virus and security. First up is Shelley Silas, who states that gun checks in the US have reached an all-time high of 3.7 million vetting applications. Sanjay Mann, on the other hand, looks a little further forward, acknowledging the rise in sales, but also questioning what will happen in the future. And finally, Helen Clark, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, has raised the point that the UN should declare the COVID-19 outbreak a threat to security, much like they did with Ebola. Why then are the UN not acting? So we've heard from our expert guest on his thoughts for the future. Now let's take a deeper look at the risk of guns on the streets of the US in the post-COVID era, and also ascertain whether this problem could become a global threat.
The alarm started going off, everybody went outside, and all the teachers are like get this way, come over here, come over here. Next thing you know, we hear the booms and everybody just starts running, everybody yelling, run, go, as fast as you can.
Chilling words from a 10th grade student describing the moment a mass shooting took place at her school in the United States. But unfortunately, something that's all too common there as well. But could the rise in gun sales from the COVID-19 outbreak be the catalyst for more shootings in the future, as over 2 million more guns are left freely available in the homes of the people of America? Many people blame the rise in violent computer games for the killing sprees that have taken place, especially in the United States. Yet, why then is the US home to the most mass shootings in the world? Is it more than just the impressions made on the people from games, or mental health, or bullying, or racial hatred?
After each of these mass shootings, sadly, nothing seems to change in America. Our laws don't change.
Whereas many people in the US protest against gun laws, gun possession and gun sales, the fact of the matter is, the shootings continue because guns are available. And as we've seen in the case of the shooting in Las Vegas at a rock concert, there appears to have been no motivation behind the attack.
This is a frequent occurrence here in the United States, mass shootings are, and we expect that this will increase post-COVID.
Referring then back to our security theory earlier in the program, the arrival of migrants fleeing poor conditions for a better life also bring with it a reason to attack, as we saw in the tragic Walmart shooting in El Paso, and hence why there's a real possibility that in the US and everywhere else around the world, when economies dry up, food shortages occur, and people start to move en masse, the future could be very grim as people try to escape the virus, yet end up in the paths of the barrels, pointing the other way. As things stand, memorials still take place for those who tragically lost their lives in mass shootings across the US. One can only imagine that should things take a turn for the worse, and with so many guns out there on the streets, what will the future hold? And will the coronavirus therefore become a two-faced killer?
It has become clear that the COVID-19 outbreak is more than just a virus, and its implications spread further than just an illness. One can only hope the security situation does not add to the misery many around the world have already suffered, and that across the world, people, governments and nations can come together to end the virus and maintain the solidarity that has seen the world unite in fighting the outbreak. I've been Leila Faramazi. This has been The Outbreak, and on behalf of myself and the whole team here, look after yourselves and each other.